Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Backstage Podcast, the first episode of the year. So happy New Year. I was going to record an episode earlier, but I didn't want it to be a solo episode where I usually rant and stuff. I wanted the first episode to be kind of like an interview, like a more happy episode. And I found the right person for it because we've been trying to do this fucking forever, man.
Yes, we have.
How's it going, man?
I'm good. It's good to see you. It's good to see your new hair.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in person in a while, and I see you with your cap.
Yeah, usually. That's what happens. There's a transition period where we try to kind of hide it. We're not sure exactly what the look is going to be, so we're trying to discover. But I'm okay with it now.
You look tough. You look tough, bro.
Yeah, that's it. The look I'm going for is like a scary look. Like I don't want you to mess with me kind of look.
When you walk into the bar, the bouncer is scared of you. Right?
That's exactly what we're going for. Yeah. It's good to see you, buddy. And for everyone watching or listening, Alex Ramacieri, old friend. We're gonna talk a lot about politics. We're gonna dive into that because you have, well, not now. I mean, you've had this kind of interest in this job, in this field for a long time. And when I created the podcast, like the whole point of the Backstage was specifically to talk to people, not necessarily in politics, but in any walk of life where you're kind of behind the scenes.
Right.
Contributing in your own way. And I wanted to bring that to the fore and to talk, to the different people about, their experience and what they do and why they do it. And obviously because, we've been working politics for so long, when you can get a chief of staff to come leave, the non-existent schedule. There's no such thing as a schedule, or free time for that matter, to come to the studio. Fuck, it's great. So glad that you're here, man.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know if you're going to introduce me to your listeners, but I'm Chief of Staff for Minister Fitzgibbon. I started in 2018 when the government was formed, but I've been in and around politics at various levels since 2002 in a more active role. But I did my first campaign when I was 5 years old with my family on the Plateau Mont-Royal. So I've been into politics for a long, long time. Okay,
so I was going to ask you how that whole involvement started in politics, because I knew that you were involved. First of all, let's just go back. We met was it 2008 or 2009 when we went to Israel?
2009, I think, yeah.
There was a young leaders delegation, whatever, that went to Israel. Super good trip, amazing experience. I can't remember how many we were, maybe about 10 or 12 or something like that. And that's where I met you for the first time. We were actually roommates. And I think a couple days into this whole trip, the organizer told me, "Oh yeah, he used to work for the PQ," and I'm like, "Shit, man, he's cool." Like, I didn't know people.
Despite what I thought of these people,
what? There's cool people over at the PQ. I didn't know that, it's cool, man. And since then, we've kept in touch. We've had some good moments, and so I wanted to ask you. This whole thing, like, how did it start? Like, you're talking about 5 years old, you started on that plateau. Were your parents involved at all politically, or were they active?
More or less. I come from an Italian family with a German grandmother, and my involvement in politics starts with my grandmother. Mm-hmm. My grandfather died. My mother's father died before I was born. And my grandmother had barely worked when she was young. And when he died, she had 3 daughters to support, so she had to find a job. But back in the day, it wasn't easy just getting a job like that when you were in your 40s or late 30s.
Right.
So she went into a community organization that she knew in the plateau, the Comité Logement Saint-Louis à l'époque. And she was hired there by a young André Lavallée, who later ran for the RCM with Jean Doré. And when André ran, my whole family supported him, obviously, because he had given a chance and a job to my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And later on, I wanted to do an internship. I worked for André Boisclair. Mm-hmm. I think we're not going to delve into that too much today, but I worked for André Boisclair. It was a great experience. And without knowing, I came into the office, and my supervisor was André Lavallée.
Okay.
And he later became my boss.
So wait, André Boisclair, this is when he's the leader of the PQ?
No, when he was minister, he was minister of municipal affairs and the environment. He was also leader.
Mm-hmm.
He had a big job, huge cabinet, and back in the day there was a lot of interns. Everyone had to have an intern. Every minister had to have an intern. It was a great experience, and it just came full circle. And that's when I got into politics. I loved it. And I stayed on. When my internship finished, they offered me a job at the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed until the election in 2003.
And that's when we all know Jean Charest came into power.
Yeah. Je suis prêt.
That was the thing. Here's the thing. What I discovered, and I've said this many times on the podcast, I came into politics completely by luck. Okay, the person that I worked for, I knew him from before. He needed someone Greek to kind of take care of certain aspects of the office, especially with links with the different communities in the riding. And it's while I was working there that I realized that there are so many avenues for youngsters to get involved, whether through college or university, different political associations, youth wings, whatever. I had no clue, man. I was oblivious to these things, despite the fact that I studied politics. And this is the weird thing, because even while studying politics, I felt that I'm going nowhere with this. Like, what is this? Like, what am I going to do with this? But I stayed because I found it interesting. And luckily enough, I ended up getting a job. But that's when I realized that, shit, there was all these things available, and I had no idea. Were you at all involved with, youth wings or different political organizations?
Not very much with the PQ. My first steps in politics were all with the municipal level. And I always was fascinated by Quebec politics. And I stumbled on it by luck. Meeting André Boisclair's chief of staff in an event, and just going for it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting, and I went for it.
How old are you at this point?
That was 2002, so I was 21. Mm-hmm. And now I'm 42.
Yeah. He looks 30, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this young
still have hair.
Here. Yeah.
I wanted to get a haircut before coming on here because you have all these cameras, but didn't have the time. Couldn't find the time.
Wanted to look good for the show. Before we get on, because I want people to understand a little bit how it works behind the scenes. I've never had a chief of staff on. It's a huge responsibility, and on top of that, it's a huge cabinet, especially after the last election.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what I was telling you before, and the reason why I'm like, shit, this guy's cool, man, from the PQ. And it opened my eyes, and this is why I love that trip, despite the fact that we went there for another reason. You get into politics, and you're so zoned in, politically, the program, the ideology, and you think that the other people across are your sworn enemies, right? And you realize at some point, when even remotely you step out of that bubble, because it's a fucking bubble, let's be honest, that they're just like you, and there's cool people that you can sit and have a beer with or chat with. And the reason why I always fucking loved sitting down with you is because it was never really so much about politics. It was just stupid things that guys just talk about whenever you go grab a beer. And that, I didn't find that so often. And maybe it's because of me. I wasn't that much into the ideology
it's
thing.
because you love beer, man.
It's also that. But it's I didn't dive I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. You would go to all these conventions and everyone was like, yeah, Charest, yeah, Philippe. And I was looking around, I'm like, why am I not like these people? Why am I not partying? Why am I not celebrating? I always had this very obviously, you follow the party lines and all that stuff. You're involved in politics, so you got to go with the flow. But I was never a fan. I wasn't, the big fanfare, the cheerleader kind of thing, And that's why I always love sitting down with you, because I felt that was gone. It was fuck that shit, man. We're not there anymore. Let's just have a beer. Let's just say stupid things that guys talk about anything else. And I always appreciated that. And I don't know that this happens with a lot of people. There's a few, maybe if I think hard, I can maybe get maybe one or two handfuls of people that I can relate that kind of experience with, but it doesn't happen very often.
No, it's true. You're right. Because, when I was never the most enraged partisan either. And I think most people who work in governments and political staff or in parties, they're not that partisan. There are obviously here and there these people who are very, it's in their blood. It's in their blood, and they like the fight, and it's okay. It's you need a variety of people in a party to make a party work. Yeah. But I think a lot of people in government, they want to contribute to Quebec society being better, and then you connect with people about making your world better, or your city better, Quebec better, Canada, whatever. And there's some form of respect that comes with the desire to contribute to Quebec or to whatever. And then there's people you get along. There's people you get along in your party, and there's people you get along in other parties. Obviously, if you're not a partisan, you're not going to connect with people who are very partisan. But you might connect with people in other parties that are not partisan more than you would with people who are very partisan in your own party.
And it does happen. Like, I have seen it. And especially, a lot of people look at the question period and they're like, fuck, what a circus. You know what I mean? But behind that curtain, a lot of people are friends. They go, they eat, they drink together, they collaborate.
Yeah, the M&As, obviously. And they connect, and they talk. They have, especially the ones who have been in Parliament for a while. There's a respect there, and some they're isolated because they're with their gang, with their group, and that's fine. Yeah. And I'm not gonna name names, and this guy is close to that person.
Oh, it's too bad.
But the ones I think a lot of people who are in and around government, they know, you just feel it. And you said the question period is a circus. I think it's a necessary circus. Yeah. That's why I call it the circus, the necessary circus.
But it's also the only thing that is remotely kind of appealing, right? I mean, it's where they debate, they exchange. Nobody sits to watch the committee work, where the actual work actually happens.
Maybe some of you listeners, I don't know, but it's the committees. They can get partisan though.
But see, what I was talking about before about the collegiality, this is where you see it in the committee work, because most of the bills that are passed, it happens pretty smoothly in committee. Like, they sit down, they exchange, they negotiate. If there's amendments, they're going to do it, except, in the last mandate, the Liberals fucked that one up. But I don't think they understand what amendment means. But insider there for the people that follow. But in general, things work out smoothly. And that's something that I obviously learned, and I'm like, it's not what people are told. People think that we come here, put the gloves on, and fucking beat the shit out of each other.
Dish it out. But I think 99% of articles and bills are passed without issues.
Exactly.
Obviously, when a new commission starts on a new bill or a bill that's been a bit more debated, there's going to be a little showboating, arm flexing. That's fine. And it's not. I'm not saying that it's just a show. But I think it sends a signal to the population that a party thinks that this or that bill is important, and they want to make a stand on it, and that's fine. I think it's the best way that the parties and the M&As have of signaling that something is important or that they disagree with it. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that every single word should be interpreted in a literal sense. Mm. You have to put it into context, and that's why you have political analysts and commentators such as you, or people that go on the radio with daily comments. And these people are there to make sense of that whole thing. It's easy to get lost in just the game, and you have to go back to the issues, but making sense of the game is important. Mm-hmm. And they're translators of politics. You are a translator of politics. You help people understand what it really means when someone does this or that. And
is it easy for you to be objective? I found that
no. keep going. But
no, because see, I found that while I was working, there was this duality, like just constant battle in my mind about what are we doing and why are we not expressing it the way that people should have that information, right? And this is what politics is, right? You try to spin it your way in order to win, the popular support. And I realized that coming out of that bubble And it's not to say that, and obviously everyone knows my colors. I ran as a candidate. I mean, there's no secret here. But coming out of that bubble made me realize that, what the fuck? Like, come on, man. You know, there's the line, and you can pivot on any way you want. But at the end, and this is why I love this podcast, because it gives me the opportunity to just explain to people, regardless of the party. And it's funny because a few people from the party, they send me messages like, dude, what are you doing? Are you with the CAC now? What the hell? How are you supporting the PQ? It's like, dude, I'm not supporting anyone. I'm telling it as it is, which is what people should have as information, right?
You know, I've had the quote unquote privilege of getting in and getting out of politics a few times.
Yeah.
4 times
so
now.
Sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to get to that, and it's good that you bring it, because, and we're talking about the bubble, and now that I'm out, I'm like, fuck, what? Like, it's such a brainwashing thing that you're in. Yeah. And thankfully, like, you know, this is not to tap myself on the shoulder or anything. I always had this presence of mind to be objective on many things.
But it's tough.
It's very difficult. But in your case, where you've been in and out, private sector or, public sector, you've always come back. And I always wondered, how do you go out and come back in?
Knowing what it is when you're in.
Yeah, exactly. Or the opposite, knowing how it is when you're out.
We all say politics is a drug, and I guess we'll get back to that afterwards. But you know, your first question was about objectivity.
Yeah.
And when you're going in, your first months in, or in a re-entry, you're like in outer space and normal world, and then you gravitate slowly to politics, and then you start your descent. Before you hit the ground, there's a moment where you still, in the first few months, you still reason rationally like a person that's not into politics. But at some point, you just get into the vibe. And I think it's necessary. It's a kind of strength that holds the people together, gravity, where you have to get with the program, because it's you can't agree with everything that a government or a party says or does all the time. That's impossible. But once you're in there, you have to get with the program. You have to support your crew, and you have to defend them. Like, in a very small circle, obviously you'll open up, but in a very not much larger circle, you have to defend your crew and your gang. Otherwise, you go crazy.
It's like a family, right? You're not always happy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you love everyone, and you just want the family unit to just stay a unit, and you want everybody to be together.
No one criticizes my family outside my family. I criticize my family as much as I want in my family.
Yeah, behind closed doors, all hell breaks loose.
Exactly. And outside, I don't want to hear about it. You know, it's kind of the same thing with a political party.
Yeah.
The crew holds together by supporting one another. But on the outside, you have to defend everything that your party does and your government does.
Which is always fascinating to me. Whenever there's like a change of leadership or whatever, you kind of see the cracks. And I'm going to get back to the Liberal Party over here, because we're not going to say the first time, but in the first time since a while, you saw this instability where normally the garbage never came out publicly. And the last year was just so humiliating, and even the last couple of months, where they just couldn't fucking get their shit in order, right? And it's like, dude, just figure it out. You know what I mean? And I went public on this. I was like, you have 19 people. How can you not figure it out? You know, like, how crazy is the caucus at this point, right? And people don't understand that there's so many dynamics. You just come out of a campaign which was a horrible loss. People don't understand there's a lot of new people coming in. So there's all this mix happening at the same time, and there's so many moving parts. But at the same time, it was all just thrown out in the public, like, fuck, here's what we are.
I always loved pirate books and stories and movies. And when there's no captain, I mean, knives are out and everything gets tough. So that's what's happening. I'm not going to criticize the Liberals or
no, we're not criticizing, because this could happen. I mean, we've been seeing it for years with the PQ.
It's an obvious shit show.
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is that, and as much as the Liberal Party throughout the years managed to keep those things behind closed doors.
The contrast was
the PQ, where it was always like, fuck it, we don't care. There was always a battle.
The contrast between the very organized liberals of the past
it's gone.
and the very disorganized liberals of the present is what is.
That was the most obvious thing, exactly, because people were so used to seeing like this well-oiled machine where, yes, there's issues, yes, there's fights, and God knows I've seen many of them. Publicly, though, it was like, look, this is the party. We're all here for the family, right? For the unit, and we're going to support it and whatever. Very rarely did things really happen to rock the boat. I mean, I think the last time was when Fatima Ouda Pepin was thrown out. I don't know if you remember that. And for me, because I've only been there since 2007. I mean, there's, a long time since, but since I started, there wasn't that many issues like that, right?
No, you're going to get.
And again, that happened in an interim leadership. It was right after the election. It was with Jean-Marc Fournier. Again, it came out when there was no real leader at the helm.
Yeah, and when you have a strong leader in politics, it changes everything. You see Poilievre with the Conservatives now. It changes the dynamics of the party. It changes the party as well.
Yeah.
The leader imprints himself on the party, and that's okay. And it's the way the new unity is reformed.
Well, yeah, because at some point you gotta trace the road and say, look, this is what we were, but we're going this direction, and you gotta follow me. And of course, people aren't gonna like it at first, but eventually you want everyone to kind of follow that line.
Exactly. And sometimes when leaders change in a party, you get marginal shifts, a few percents here and there, a few issues that the positions change on. Sometimes the shift is bigger, and when the shift is bigger, then that's when you get instability, and or maybe the Liberals are heading towards a more left-leaning policy or program.
And it's clashing.
And if it's going to clash with some of the Liberals of the past and some of the Liberal policies of the past. And in that change, that's going to generate instability, that's for sure.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about you, because I got to know you. You were involved with the PQ. And I always thought that, okay, and I remember even with Pauline Marois, you were helping out Mr. Pelado. So in my mind, it was, you're part of the PQ. And then in 2018, the CAQ wins. I had no idea what you were doing during that campaign. But then I heard through some common friends that, Alex, he's with Pierre Fitzgibbon. I'm like, what? Alex Ramacieri? Alex? I'm like, oh, really? What the fuck happened there?
I was...
what happened? How did that... Look, obviously, Legault came in and grabbed a lot of people from the PQ. Some... I don't think he had any liberals, but, the ADQ, there were some guys...
There are liberals, yeah. I have colleagues who were former liberals.
Yeah, so he kind of merged both kind of...
Yeah,
parties.
CAQ is a coalition.
Yeah.
And I always... I started working at the Chambre de Commerce in 2009. I always had this appeal for economic development of Quebec. I think it's been a steady element in my career. And I always thought that the Mr. Legault's program of economic development and the catching up of Ontario, it's been debated about a lot in the last year, whether it's a good target. But I think it's a direction, and I'll always like that direction. And I thought that the economic policies of the previous governments or of many governments and parties in the last years did not appeal to me. And that was what I thought was very, very appealing to me. And I thought I could contribute to it. And I didn't just want to go into government. I wanted to join and be able to contribute to that economic agenda. That's what I wanted to do, so that's what I did. And I'm very, very happy with my decision. Obviously, I had a lot of friends who were at the CAQ, and I was very comfortable with the policies. So I went, but I wanted to do that specifically. I didn't just want to go into government.
What about the people that that were in the PQ, that were former colleagues or friends? How is that reality? Like when you make the decision, and of course, the decision is yours and yours alone. And if you're happy with that decision, I'm happy as well. But again, going back to what we were saying about how it's a bubble, and when you're in a party, like there's this whole partisanship that comes in, and you've fought you fought a battle with the party, and you've campaigned with them, and then suddenly, these former colleagues or friends, they see you go to another one. How was that? Was there any shock at all in there? I mean, did anyone come and confront you? Like, what the fuck, dude? What's going on? What happened?
Some people did, obviously. But, I see Quebec with two large political families. The Reds, they've been in the same party since 1867, the Liberal Party. The Blues, though, have had many forms and many parties and many iterations. The Conservatives, the Union Nationale, then the PQ, now the CAQ. And there's some form, it's not the same party, obviously, but there's some form of continuity there. And it makes sense for a lot of people when you put it in historical perspective that these people would transition. So if you were at the PQ at the beginning of the PQ in 1970 or the first government election in 76, you didn't get to the transition, obviously, because you started way back then.
Yeah.
But if you're active in politics in these periods of transition, you transition. René Lévesque transitioned from the Liberals to the PQ. So I think the people who've had this a bit more of a political experience and see that continuity of the blue tradition in Quebec, they understand. Obviously, some people are very partisan and they've had stronger reactions, but since my move, a lot of other people have made the move. And people who've criticized me in the past have made the move afterwards.
Right, right.
I think now the question is not as sensitive as it was in 2018, but I did get a few comments. And
you know what I found interesting, and I think that François Legault played his cards right, because he bet a lot on the regions, and he won. I mean, let's be honest. He won his bet, and he completely decimated the PQ and the Liberals also from the regions. The contrast, though, and this is what I want to talk to you a little bit before we get to your responsibilities, because I want people to understand exactly what it is that you do in the kind of the day to day. I feel like there's been this contrast because of the support that he's gained mostly in the regions, that we're seeing kind of this transition towards the regions versus the cities kind of thing. And after the last election, and many don't agree with me, and it's fine, but I mean, I look at, what the facts are, and even the Liberal Party has been reduced to a regional party, whether they want to accept it or not.
It's a fact.
Yeah. Dude, you're not going to...
print up a map and you can't argue with
it's not
map.
because you have one seat out, like about an hour, not even 40 minutes out of Montreal, that you're a regional party. That's not the case. So you've been reduced to a regional party. Obviously, it's the big metropolis. It's Montreal. But the rest, though, do you feel like there's this thing between regions versus cities? Because it's definitely been a challenge within the Liberal Party of how do we, how do we kind of orient ourselves now? Where do we position ourselves? Because we have the regions with these demands, and then we have the cities that have what appears to be completely opposite demands. And I feel that François Legault has really... hit that nail where he's like, this is where we belong. We're well camped over here, and it's issues that divide the rest of the parties.
Well, it's a tough question. I think, Pierre is a minister for regional economic development as well as other stuff, and so we talk with people all over Quebec. I think there's a sentiment of distance. I wouldn't say alienation, but there's a feeling of distance from the decisions of government that a lot of people in the regions have, that has not been addressed by mainstream politics for a while, except by the CAQ and by Mr. Legault. And I think this notion that the CAQ is a party of benevolent populism is close to the truth, and it's about talking to the people, talking about their issues and talking about their regions more than actually dividing Quebec between regions and cities. So when you talk about local issues, people in the regions will connect more. It's not about opposing regions to cities. It's about connecting with these people. And I think for better for worse, the Liberals and the PQ have been in the last years parties of elites, either economic elites or ideological elites or whatever, intellectual elites more than ideological. And that has changed the way they talk to certain people, to parties who are concerned about being right, or parties who are concerned about representing some subgroup or some demographics. That changes the party. I think a political party, in order to have success, has to talk to a lot of people and make people feel included in government decisions. It's about getting people to trust government. For better, for worse, in Quebec, government is everywhere. Like, you have to have government permission or government permits to do a lot, and we're trying to cut down on that. But since government is ubiquitous, then you have to have trust in government, and reestablishing that trust in government has been a lot of what the CAQ and Mr. Legault have done, and I like that about the party.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying about talking to the people, and I just feel like the last maybe, I don't know, 5-8 years, it's gotten very complicated, because when you're talking about talking,
that's because you're getting old, man.
It is. So yeah, exactly. The perspective changes. No, but you're absolutely right that there needs to be developed this way of actually reaching out and talking to the people and understanding the real challenges on the ground. But the more you do that, the more that you realize how diverse Quebec is. It's enormous. It's huge. So when you're trying to bring in a bill like Bill 96, for example, which maybe in the regions makes 100% sense, to the big cities like, you know, Montreal specifically, it makes absolutely no sense, and it's tough to balance that.
Well, I don't want to comment Bill 96 too much, because I'm not an elected official, obviously, but I think, the debate, the media debate about Bill 96 has completely deviated the sense of the bill, which is an evolution of the charter of the Bill 101. But fundamentally, I think the Premier, François Legault, and the party feels that we need to protect French language in Quebec and North America. So your perspective on the bill is going to be directly correlated to how you feel the French language is going now and going to evolve in North America in the next years. If you feel that it's fine, it's going fine, there's no threat, and it's not such an important thing that you need to protect it, then obviously you're going to oppose Bill 96. And if you think it needs protecting and we're not doing enough, then you're going to support Bill 96. So Bill 96 is, à la limite, it's irrelevant. It's about how people feel about French that's important.
But that's the whole point. People in the regions feel completely different with the way people feel, for example, it's not for example. I mean, it's primarily Montreal, where you have most of your Anglo community. And I just feel that on that specific issue, it's taken like a right or left kind of approach. Like, there's no middle ground. I don't know how this is.
The actual text of the bill is pretty balanced. It's pretty fair. And we've said, well, the ministers in the previous government said on numerous occasions that they were willing to see how it would evolve, and we were ready to have some form of flexibility in the bill, and then amendments were introduced then, and it made the bill more balanced. And I think on the whole, when people will have the experience of a few years living with the bill, and it will be adjusted by time and the courts and everything, people will live with Bill 96 as comfortably than they live with Bill 101 now.
Let's talk a little bit about your job, Chief of Staff.
Yeah.
Not just to any minister, probably one of the biggest cabinets, I think, especially following the last election, where you
health is bigger, but still.
Yeah. Health, obviously health is the biggest. But when we're talking about the influence and the impact, Pierre Fitzgibbon has has a lot of weight on his shoulders, and especially following the last campaign, you also absorbed energy as well, which created a little bit of a ruckus in the news, and even Hydro-Quebec, and we can talk about Hydro-Quebec too. But are you managing the entire cabinet, or are you more focused on, for example, regional development or just the economy? You're at the helm of the entire cabinet?
Yeah, the entire cabinet, Pierre Fitzgibbon's cabinet, is integrated. We're integrated with the deputy, ministre délégué, delegated ministre délégué. What's ministre délégué in English?
It's a delegate minister.
Minister, anyways. So we're fully integrated with delegate minister's staff as well. So I manage the whole thing, the two cabinets basically.
Who do you have? It's Christopher Skeet.
Exactly. He's
great guy, by the way. Great guy. Yeah.
So Montreal Energy, regional economic development, and standard economy and innovation, they're all under the same cabinet, which I manage.
I want to get to COVID because that completely turned things upside down, and I want to get your opinion on this, because obviously you had a huge role to play in that whole policy. But before I get there, I just want people to understand the challenges not only of working in a cabinet, because that's complicated in itself, but to actually manage the entire cabinet, the day to day. How it, like, obviously you like it because you're doing it, but give everyone like an idea of your day to day and how busy that schedule is like.
Well, the people who've worked in government, or your listeners who know government, will know. But your day starts with the media coverage in the morning. So you read the papers, you read the revue de presse, and then you listen to the radio at the same time.
Looking for hunting stories.
Exactly. You write some lines, you answer the emails that came in during the night or late on the previous day. You do all of that while you take care of your kid. You brush your teeth and you tie your cravat for the 7th time because you can't get this stupid knot right. So you do all that. A lot of cabinets have stand-up meetings in the morning, just 5-15 minutes, discussing the issues. We have one réunion d'équipe team meeting at 9:00 on Monday, and then basically it's meetings, and there's a lot of days where it's back-to-back meetings. Today I'm a little more free because the minister is in Davos at the World Economic Forum.
So you're having fun while he's not around.
Exactly. And it's early, still early in the year. This week is not as quiet as last week was. Starting to be a little more crazy. When I turn my phone back on, I'm going to have a lot of messages and texts and stuff. But basically, you read the paper, you find the stories in the morning, and you adjust in the early morning. If you have question period, then it's about detecting the whole issues that could produce a question from the opposition, and writing lines on that issue. Pierre is pretty autonomous with the way he works, so we feed him with a fish, with a note, and he redoes his own lines, and then he goes into Parliament, and then if he gets a question, usually it goes well. We're pretty happy. Doesn't get a question, we're like, oh well, we worked for nothing.
Exactly.
But and then there's a lot of meetings with civil servants, with the department. So I'm the chief of staff. Usually I meet with the deputy minister. The political advisors, they meet with the assistant deputy ministers. Sometimes we have meetings all together. Sometimes it's me with the deputy minister and the minister. And there's a lot of meetings with the office of the premier. There's a lot of meetings with other departments as well, usually political staff. And obviously a lot of people want to get some FaceTime in with staff. How
early does the day start and how late does it finish on average?
On a Parliament day, it's a little bit before 6. On a day before a Conseil des Ministres, I'm going to have materials to read as much as I want. And, it could not end. At some point, you just put your phone down or put your iPad down and you stop.
Yeah.
So it depends on that. Sometimes you have events. Obviously, with COVID and post-COVID, a lot of the events have gone. So you have more time to work on your stuff. But before COVID, we had a lot of cocktails, événements de l'association, de this or that, which was very time-consuming. So you had to organize your time a little differently. Now events are starting to come back, but they're not as frequent.
As it was before.
Yeah, not the same thing.
Let's talk a little bit about COVID. Disastrous for everyone, obviously. Completely changed our way of life. I want to know politically from your end, what kind of headache that was, or a puzzle to just make sense of it all.
Well, it's a tough question because we're political staff, we're political appointees, and we're in government to do the politics of the minister of the party, of the leader of the party, the prime minister, Mr. Legault. But during COVID, we had to be state officials. We had a direction which was inspired by a group of people around Mr. Legault and the Santé Publique, and we had wanted to be coherent with that policy. We had alignment with a finance minister with regards to what amount of money we could spend, because our issue was supporting businesses. But it was never about politics or partisan politics. It was about doing the right thing and being coherent with government. And there was such, I'm sorry for my French, but there's so much commentary, and listening to the media ask questions every day to the politicians made a lot of people realize how things really are. But what we had to do was think of Quebec, and us at the Department of the Economy was think of Quebec's economy and businesses going forward. Thing is, we didn't know if this thing was going to last 2 months or 2 years. So we had to have flexibility in there. We had to be quick. Couldn't discuss it and go consult and everything. So we had to take decisions quickly and adapt. So adapting was basically our thing. We came out with policies. First thing we had to do was that structure of businesses that had to close. I don't know if you remember, but we had a sequence of businesses that had to close down. We quickly came to a stronger lockdown than in other jurisdictions. I think the health bilan in the end is pretty good because of that. But then we have to have a sequence, and then we had to have businesses that could remain, that were essential. And that whole essential business
that was my next question.
Was really tough.
How frustrating was that from your point of view, or from your position, where you want to make sure that businesses are okay during this tumultuous time, and you can't deliver because the word from the other colleagues, which are managing the health, are telling you, no, dude, this is, the hotel industry closed, restaurant industry closed, like everything is closed, and people are knocking down your door, dude, we need to get these businesses up and running, and your hands are pretty much tied. You can't do anything.
No, I think that at the first, during the first lockdown, there was a sense of that we need to close down, and even the sectors that we closed down in Quebec that were not closed in other provinces or countries collaborated very well with government. The tough thing was, I feel, was that in Quebec we're used to clear rules. We like rules and systems that are absolute.
A direction.
Yeah. But in that very odd situation of COVID and of lockdown and of essential services or businesses, you had to have judgment and common sense, and appealing to people to make their own decisions, and not be scared that the police would come and find them to death, was tough, because people like very clear mandated government decisions. And obviously there are so many specific cases that you couldn't tell everyone to do what you wanted to do, and you had to trust people to make their own decisions. And I think for a lot of people that was tough. So we had the food industry was open, basically, so because people need to eat. But some businesses had food that they sold, but they weren't primarily an épicerie, right?
Yeah, like a
grocery
Walmart
store. So Walmart was a case, but we sorted out Walmart fairly easily at first. And then we had some stores that had sold leftovers of other stores. Some of it was food, some of it was pants, some of it was lawnmowers, you know. So you'd have to tell the people, obviously, lawnmowers are not essential. Pants, you know, they can be pretty useful on a day, any given day. And obviously food is essential. But if you sell 1% of food, 2% of pants, and 97% lawnmowers, you're going to close down.
Yeah.
So where's that call? You can't have a percentage. Oh, if it's 2%, you're open. If it's 1%, you're closed. You had to have some flexibility and intelligence. And obviously, most store owners wanted to stay open.
Oh, for sure.
And thought they were important. So it wasn't about just getting the business. For some it was, but it wasn't just about getting more business and being able to do good in that period. It was a genuine sentiment that people thought they could contribute to the fight against COVID, and they were important. They were essential. Telling a business you have to shut down because you're not essential, you're not important, is really tough from a government perspective, and it's really tough in a political perspective. So this whole episode was really, really difficult.
You know, for me, what I found interesting was the way that people transitioned, because you're right. In the beginning, there was this huge wave of solidarity. Let's go. We can do this. Let's, everyone follow the direction that the premier was putting us on. Everyone contributed in their own way. But I feel like the last year, or maybe the last 6 months, I mean, when everything opened last April, May, somewhere around there, those last 6 to 8 months were very bad. I mean, people were just doing whatever. I know personally people that were like, fuck that shit, man. I don't care. I'll do whatever I want. Let them come in. Let them do whatever. Like, there was this, people were just tired of being told what to do. And
And that's normal, man. I mean, at first people were scared and they were looking for some form of guidance, and they were a little more docile, to use a word that was used.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And at some point, after months and years, people feel that they have enough information. They've heard the guidance, they've heard the instructions, they've heard the mandates, and they're going to take their decision, right? So if it's mandatory to wear a mask to go in public transit, you have to wear your mask. But then there's other types of situations where the instructions are more open and there are more suggestions. And that's where we've had difficulty in Quebec.
What also screwed things up is that there was mixed messages coming in from other provinces or even around the world, where the health directives were different, the policies taken were different, and it just made no sense at some point. It's like, how are we? I'll give you a specific example. Like, the business were allowed to reopen, but there was a maximum number of people going in. So they had to wait outside, and then you had to wear a mask. But at some point, it made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, a lot of people said that we need to better communicate this or that decision. But at some point, you're communicating every single fucking day.
Yeah.
More information, and this type of store is going to open. If you have 2,500 square feet, you can open. And if you have less than that, you have to have a distance. You have to have a tape.
But what made no sense is that who comes up with this? Like, what's the thing between 2,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet?
You just had to pick one.
You know what I mean?
Because you can't have absolute rules for everything.
Yeah.
You can't have studies for everything. If you wait for studies for everything and during COVID, you're not going to do anything. Everyone's going to die and your hospitals are going to crack up and blow up. You have to take decisions. You can't have a study or peer review study for every decision that you take in government, especially during a crisis. So obviously, every government in the world took different decisions and approaches. And everyone got criticized based on other people's decisions. People in Ontario criticized the Ontario government based on the Quebec government's decisions, which we don't know, or that most people don't know. But Quebec's example was used throughout Canada and in other jurisdictions to say, we're not doing enough, because a lot of Quebec was maybe more on the strict part of the axis of if you had to have a graph of governments. But a lot of people said, well, in Quebec, they had less debts because blah, blah, blah. We should have done this and that, and we would have less debts. But every government is adapted to its people and to the party that runs it, obviously, but to the intrinsic nature of its population and of its people. You couldn't manage Texas the way you managed Quebec, obviously. And it's normal. So there was never going to be a governor of Texas that would shut down Texas the way we shut down Quebec, with the consequence and impact that these decisions had. But it's okay. We've all adapted. And I think most people in Quebec were fairly comfortable with the general direction that the government took.
Look, see, here's the interesting thing, because I would talk with a lot of people, and they're like, this sucks. Nobody's happy. And then
COVID sucks. No one's happy during COVID. So it had to suck.
But
it was going to suck for sure.
The argument was that, and I have a lot of friends and different people that would talk to me. They're like, dude, this is wrong. It's like, nobody likes this. And I was like, well, it appears that they do, because when you're looking at the numbers, there is a high satisfaction. And obviously, we can fall into the whole rhetoric of the media, like, how do they conduct surveys? And it doesn't really matter. It was just that it was a frustrating time, and many times I thought about you, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, managing a cabinet at a time of crisis like this must be like, is he even getting any sleep? The kids, but I want to get back to the cabinet, because there's this debate that has come up in the last year or so, specifically linked to your boss, Pierre Fitzgibbon, because of the links he has with businesses, and there's this whole concept, and I think I did a podcast on this a while back, on whether or not business-oriented people, or people that have links with business, should be doing politics. And obviously, this is an argument that comes from the left. Quebec Solidaire is all over this, which for me makes absolutely no sense. The idea is to get the very best to contribute. Yeah. I've always supported that, but it comes down to the fact that someone like Pierre Fitzgibbon, who has this reputation and this this huge network of people that obviously have done business with government and continue to do business with the government, and a person like that decides, and let's be honest here, guys, he's not doing this for the money. Okay, no, I know what elected officials get paid, and you can figure that out. It's public as well. He's clearly not doing this for the money, but there's been this very thin line where this guy with this huge network is involved in the economic department, linked to quite possibly, businesses that he's worked with before or that he has connections with. And it has spurred this huge debate on whether or not people like that should be in office. And there's ethics violations and stuff. I mean, it's public. I don't want to go down that road. But I just want to pick your brain on how it is to manage that boat when you have all these things surfacing, and you have a guy who is obviously very competent, at the right position, but faced with this growing rhetoric, mostly from the left, where it's like, these people cannot be in politics anymore. It's embarrassing. It's bad for governance and all that sort of thing. Like, how do you juggle that?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think that a parliament should be representative of the diversity of the population. And I think a quality government has to have diversity of experiences. Mm-hmm. Any parliament or elected body should have people from the left, from the right, older, younger, social experience, and economic experience. That, I think, for me, that's a healthy democracy has that diversity in its parliament. And so that means having people like Pierre Fitzgibbon be in the government. When I came in, I knew that working with him would be different than working with someone who's been on salary his whole life. I was fine with that. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. No one knew, because he was kind of an oddity. Mm-hmm. But I think the contribution of the people who come from the business sector has huge importance in a parliament. And I'm going to work and continue working in politics and putting effort into making sure that politics remains attractive for these people, because otherwise you cut yourself off from a portion of the people who can really, really make a difference.
You know, the frustrating thing here, and it's not frustrating, it's mostly the hypocrisy that you have in politics. And again, this is nothing new. I mean, everyone knows this. If you were to rewind, you know, before 2018, and you told Quebec Solidaire that a guy like Pierre Fitzgibbon is interested in running under your banner, I can bet my house that a guy like Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois would never say, no, this guy's a business guy. He doesn't belong in politics. There's no fucking way in hell that they would reject a guy like this.
I don't want to speak for Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, but for sure having a strong economics figure in any party is a plus. Mm-hmm. The question is, would a person like Pierre Fitzgibbon go over to Quebec Solidaire?
It's completely hypothetical, and we know that in a logical world it would never happen. But the argument is that you're bitching about something that you wish you had, and maybe they have very competent people. I'm sure they do over there. But fuck, man, this is what I hate specifically in politics. You're complaining about something that you would love to have. Like, what's the issue here? The fact that this guy, and I get it, there's a line that you can't cross. That's why there's an ethics commissioner there. And, you know, evidently we saw that, you know, he's crossed that line. But that's one thing, and it should be handled. But to take that and to suggest that these people should be banned from running, it's ridiculous to me.
I think you said he crossed the line. I don't want to be too partisan there, but I have to say that the line was designed in a very specific context, not having in mind people with
that kind of background that have investments.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've made my disclaimer there. But you know, going back to the question period before, we said it was a necessary circus. I think governments and institutions adapt with these vigorous debates, and it's a good thing that we have debates around people like Pierre and like others. And they make our institutions evolve. And at some point, maybe ethics rules will be different or better adapted, or we'll have some form of flexibility given to various officials that can make these situations more adaptable to the necessity of having these people, the business people, come into it.
Contributing to politics.
Exactly.
100%. How did you feel about absorbing the energy sector into this department? Because there was a lot of stuff being, said in the media. The director or CEO of Hydro-Quebec was very vocal. She was against it. She thought that, we're going to lose our control. We can't just, think of Hydro-Quebec, in a profit-based strategy that Pierre Fitzgibbon thought he was going to, and she went off on that kind of tangent. Finally, things seem to be okay. Now we found out last week that she resigned. But just for you as an administrator to know that you're picking up a huge department, energy in Quebec. This is one of the things that we're mostly proud of. And now you're assuming that responsibility. Yeah. How was that?
Well, as a manager, you have to make sure, as a political strategist and advisor and manager, you have to make sure that your team is ready. And it wasn't so much that we took on energy, is that we had a program that came in with, there was a logic to merging the two. So we had a program and ambition. So as a manager, you have to get ready for that. You change the structure of your cabinet, you hire the right people, you look for talent. In this morning's political commentary on one of the radio outlets, someone said that when you're in politics, you're constantly a headhunter. And I thought that made a lot of sense, because you're always looking for the types of people that can help you internally, externally. And you're as a manager, when you hire people, you're constantly interviewing people and meeting with people. So I had to get the right talent in the right places for the program that we wanted to deploy, which is very ambitious. And it's tough hiring people in cabinets. Salaries are constrained by the Conseil du Trésor rules and everything. So it's when you want to have some people who have a deep background in a sector, sometimes the offer that you make is not going to be, the money is not appealing there. Exactly. So you have to have a lot of people who are going to make a sacrifice when they come into government in terms of money. Some are fine, but a lot of people have to take pay cuts when they come into government. Convincing these people is sometimes it's a bit hard. Leave a few $1,000 on the table is not too bad, but when it's more, then it's tough. So you have to carve out a role and a position and make sure these people are happy. So I think we managed that pretty well.
So what's the strategy now? If I understand correctly, you want, or at least what has been suggested in the media, is to use Hydro-Quebec as an incentive to get more foreign investors to come into Quebec. Is that fair, or have they completely thrown you guys under the bus?
You're taking me down a very delicate road. Which you said you would not do. Yeah, no, look, I don't want to put you in any trouble. I just want to know, like, the direction, because you said that Hydro-Quebec was always part of the plan with the direction that Pierre Fitzgibbon wanted to give the economy department. How does this fit in? Well, you can't base your analysis, like anyone who's worked in government understands that you can't base your analysis of what's going on in government solely on media reports and articles. So the journalists are doing their best, but some of the coverage has not represented fairly the direction we're going. I think the minister is going to give more precision and more precise indications of our program in the next months. But for sure, Hydro-Quebec, and that has been at the base of the logic of our whole reasoning. Hydro-Quebec is the largest company in Quebec in terms of theoretical value, right? I think everyone knows that. It's a huge company. It's a huge utility. And it has a huge impact on economic development. But it has an impact that goes far beyond tariffs, electricity costs, and everything, and prices. It's far more complex, and it goes deep into the industrial fabric of Quebec. So having Hydro-Quebec as a more valued asset for us, for Quebec, it's huge. Sweden has IKEA, the Netherlands have this or that, Philips or whatever companies. Korea has Samsung. Quebec has Hydro-Quebec. We also have CGI and Bombardier and everything, but Hydro-Quebec is more than just part of that conversation. It's a huge company. I think if you see it that way, it makes sense that you would unite,
incorporate it with the business,
and energy.
I don't want to take up a lot of your time. I just want to focus a little bit on, the CAQ as a party going forward. You mentioned before it's a coalition. I think François Legault is probably the best person to put these two camps together. There seems to be a good cohesion. But again, like we said, there's people coming in that were more liberal. There's people that were with the PQ. How do you see, because there's rumors circulating around the fact that, it may be the last mandate for François Legault, maybe not, who knows? We're not going to sit here and speculate. But going back to what we're saying about, when the leader leaves and finding that right captain to keep that balance, is it difficult to manage people from completely opposite ideologies, PQ, liberal, under one kind of roof? And despite the fact that Premier Legault has done the job pretty okay so far, going forward, is that going to destabilize things? I mean, what are the dynamics? And obviously, you can't discuss what's happening in caucus there, and I'm sure it's chaotic as any other caucus. But I often think, okay, what happens if you take Legault out of that equation? How do the PQ guys and the more liberal guys come to terms?
Well, maybe in the first few months of government back in 2018, that division was felt. But I think in the last years, the fact that we're a coalition, everyone's comfortable with that. And we don't feel that divide between people's pasts as much as we might have in the first few months. So obviously the party's popular right now. So when the party's popular, the leader's popular, everyone loves the premier. He's our leader. Everyone's gathered around that. And so the divisions are not obvious. Maybe if down the road in 6 mandates, when he retires, maybe that'll be different. But for now, we're all around the party as a party for economic development and for the protection and preservation of French in Quebec. So those are the two pillars of the party. And I think everyone in the party is comfortable with that. And going forward, the CAQ is going to keep those two pillars. Maybe the environment will take a little more space. Maybe education will have a more prevalent, I don't know. But those two pillars are going to remain. And I think everyone in the staff, in the party, the elected officials, everyone's comfortable with our positions on those two critical issues. And as long as people are comfortable with that, I think we're going to have a strong party.
Alex, dude, thank you so much for coming. I don't want to take up too much time. I know that you're a busy guy. You were kind of take out your tie when you came in. You saw me dressed like a fucking homeless person. You're like, shit, I overdressed for this.
No, I wanted to bring my cap, but I couldn't find it.
I appreciate it, dude. It was good seeing you. I'm not gonna. I wish I can see you more often, but I can't. I'm not delusional. I'm not gonna say, hey, dude, let's go grab a beer sometime. I know what's going on in your life right now. I'm very happy for you. I'm excited that you're back into politics and that you're doing stuff that you're happy with. It was a pleasure to see you again, man, and I love the fact that you shared your knowledge with our audience.
Nice meeting you again. And the good thing is that every time we run into each other, we're back at the same place with the same easiness. And I love that about you. I love that about your podcast, because when you listen to the podcast, you feel that you're in that kind of conversation. You have a good voice, you have a good laugh, everything flows. It's very natural. It's like having a conversation in a bar. I think people are comfortable with that, and that's why you have success.
Thank you so much, buddy. Hope to see you soon.
À bientôt. Ciao.